This week has been just absolutely wild as far as busyness goes. I had to remind myself of what I talked to you about a few weeks ago about taking care of yourself, because I caught me jumping up in the morning, feeding the dogs, getting Kathy out of the house, and diving right into work. And so many things going on, and then had a couple of things with the band this week, so it was busyness times 3. So it was real easy to get away from it. I really had to slow down and stop and think. And then I realized that part of my work was taking care of me. I was studying so I could talk to you this morning. And I found that the more I studied, the more I learned, the more I was taking care of me. So it's pretty cool. Thank you for letting me do this. Well, like I said, this morning is, I wanted to talk about the metaphysical part of the story of Christmas. And when I started getting into that, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just so cool. There were so many really neat things that I had not considered before, and what I studied caused me to consider even more. And so instead of trying to tell a story from a metaphysical standpoint, I decided, let's break this down. I want to talk about the characters and the different things that happened inside the Christmas story and what they mean. This metaphysical viewpoint does not take away from the Christmas story at all. It actually enhanced it for me. You know, I thought it was you either believed what the Bible taught you and what the churches have taught you all the way, all the way through growing up, or you believe this. And after all of these years, I finally realized they really go very well together. Now, there are some experts out there that say some of the Christmas story is true, some is not. There are experts out there that say none of it is, all of it is. It depends on what expert you want to listen to. I choose to listen to all of them. I do. Because I figure all of them have some part of the truth. Now, like anything else in life, we have to determine what part works for us. And in doing that, I do not judge what part works for you. Okay? What works for me may not work for Kathy, and what worked for Kathy may not work for Gloria. So, leave the judgment out of it, and you take this story, and you make it work for you. So the first character that came to mind was Mary. Mary represents the feminine. The feminine energy. We get into motherhood, we get into intuition, we get into the emotions, the feelings. That all was extremely important and had to be the first step of the Christmas story. It could start nowhere else. And I'm not even talking about being pregnant with Jesus. It had to start with Mary because intuition is what allowed her to connect with this message, this spiritual message coming in. She received a message that something new was taking place. She received a message that divine order was stepping up. Now, she could have ignored that as she's hearing things. She could have ignored that as I'm making this up in my own head. But no, she heard her intuition. She tuned into it. By doing that, she elevated the presence of God. That had to happen first. This is above and beyond having a little baby. That power it had to happen. Once Mary discovered that she was pregnant, once she took in all of this information coming to her from God, from Gabriel, she had some choices to make. She had choices to make. She could have run and hid. Because think about that time period. How hard would it have been for a female to carry a child without a husband? This is some amazing strength. She didn't hide.
14 years old.
14 years old. Mm-hmm. She did not hide. She did not take her belief, her trust in God, her spirituality, and put it under a blanket behind a rock in a cave somewhere. She lived it. Again, she elevated the presence of God. She elevated the message of God. She elevated and expanded this new awareness that was coming about. Now you have Joseph, the father figure, the male energy, the intellect coming into play, the strength, the protection, all of the things that you expect from a father figure. He really didn't have a big role in the whole birth process. He easily could have just walked away and said, she's been messing around on me, I'm out of here. He didn't. He shows a beautiful strength of trust. He trusted Mary in all that she was telling him. He trusted the signs and the messages that he was getting from God. Pretty powerful stuff. Imagine his position in those times. He had all of his buddies having to say, "Stone her. Get rid of her. You have every right." And he did consider for a while to marry her and then divorce her so she wouldn't be shamed. He didn't. He did marry her, but he stayed with her. He knew that he had a bigger role to play. He accepted that there was more. So he shows a beautiful strength, a beautiful lesson in trust, in protection, because he protected Mary and that baby. And he allowed this story to unfold. Together, they showed an amazing strength that we just don't see today. Most people today would have run off to abortions or run off to adoptions or would have hidden or there's no telling. Because even today, there's still a little taboo in the unwed parents. So, beautiful, beautiful story. Now, the other part of this were the angels. When we're talking about Mary and Joseph, the angels were the deliverers of God's message. They were the ones that came in and said, here you go. For us today, some of us see angels, some of us do not. Some of us have intuition, some of us don't want to accept that. Some of us think it's just a thought or a gut instinct. But the angels do speak to us, however you want to interpret them and define them. And so they carried this message back and forth, from God to Mary and Joseph, and then of course their response back, I'm sure. But so the angels play this huge this huge role in all of this, and Mary and Joseph thankfully tuned into that. Now the stable, some of the experts say that the inn was really not full, that Jesus had to be born in a stable. And the reason they say this is being born in the inn would have birthed Christ right in the middle of the chaos and the busyness and the sameness of everything else that's going on. Being born in the stable, he was not limited. The birth was not limited by walls or people. It had to happen out in the stable. There was a connection to earth energy. There was a connection to the animals. It was a connection to nature, and basically told the world, there is no limit. There is no limit to this new consciousness. everything lined up to prove this was a new consciousness. And the stable was the first part of that. It had to happen that way. Being born in the inn, sure, the Christ consciousness could have happened, but it would have been born into limits, born into walls, born into craziness, chaos, because at that time, everybody was reporting in for the census, I believe is what they called it. And so it was really crazy there at the end. Yes, it was busy, but according to the experts, it was not full.
There's one interpretation that says instead of the inn was full, it was not the place for them.
Right. Mm-hmm. It was not the place for them in the inn. That's perfect. Yeah. They were just not intended to be there. Okay. Now Jesus, the name itself kind of talks to and proves up the fact that Joseph was not the father. If there was ever any doubt, the tradition at that time was firstborn son is named after the father. Period. That was just the way it was. Well, here we go. Joseph is naming a son Jesus. That had to send up some red flags. Another place that Joseph could have gone, I can't go there. But he didn't. He stayed with it. So his name Jesus, that was just one more of the signs that he was something special. And again, it's just adds to a new consciousness. Something's happening here. Now Herod, this part of the story, they do have, the experts, when I say the experts do have many facts to prove it. The story of Herod was true. Herod did hear about this new king, this child that was going to be the King of Kings, that was going to rule over all of them. Herod did hear that, and he did put into play the execution of all the male children under the age of 2. And there's more to that. But what Herod represents here is the ego. Herod represents the ego in the fact that the ego, when threatened with this new consciousness, feels like it's going to be out of power. It's going to attack. Anytime you bring in a new consciousness, does your ego not start finding reasons not to believe that? Your ego starts giving you walls to overcome and barriers to get around because this new consciousness threatens its existence. Now, I know for me, mine does it every day. Every day mine has something to jump up in the way. Last night was a perfect example. I was telling some of you about it. The guitarist for the band that I work with, the valet lost his keys. And now he drives a very nice little yellow Thunderbird. So automatically my ego goes, they stole your car, dude. I'm coming up with all kinds of stuff and ready to get in somebody's face. And it was very hard for me not to let the temper come out, let the ego take over. But the new consciousness is stay calm, ask questions, get the information you need, and then release it to whatever needs to happen. That's what ended up happening. But I could feel the ego coming in. I wanted to scream. I wanted to holler. I wanted to make this right. And I've been studying this for quite a while. I've been working on this for 20-something years. The ego essence thing for at least 20 years. And it still comes in. So that's what Herod represents. It's the ego that he's being threatened. His world is about to change by this new consciousness. So, and then the wise men. These were some of my favorites. And I'm going to read some things here because I found some really interesting things. There are many people that don't believe the wise man actually happened. So we're going to talk to the metaphor of it all. They represented, one of the things that I came to believe was they represented that this new consciousness, this new belief was not limited to one particular person, one particular type of people. We had the wise men over here, which represented the elite, the rich, the powerful, the kings. And then we had shepherds over here representing common folk. So those together tell me that this new consciousness is not limited that anybody can tap into it. They came from the east. The east is also believed to be the direction of source, the spiritual realm of consciousness. So even the direction they came from had significance. The wise men's story showed that the Christ mind is beyond the power of kings. Now the gifts they brought were symbolic as well. From a spiritual standpoint, the gold is a realization of the richness of spirit. It's divine ideas. The frankincense was a realization of the beauty of things. Again, divine ideas, the beauty of things spiritual. And the myrrh was a realization of the eternality of spirit. Now you can break this down in another way. Let me find out where I wrote this because this is good stuff. The gold was a gift that represented the physical. That was the abundance and the prosperity, riches, material things. Frankincense was a gift that represented the emotional body, and the myrrh represented the soul. Now, the myrrh is actually an embalming fluid, which sounds like a really weird gift to give a baby. But it served as a symbol to release and let go of all the things that no longer served or stood in the way of making this Christ consciousness. So they were basically saying, let all things that don't work, all things that stand in the way of this new consciousness, die off. Release it. And if you're going to be doing something with embalming fluid, you're probably talking about doing some sort of celebration to let it go. And we're going to do that on New Year's. If anybody wants to be here, we're going to do a burn and let go of things that don't work. So the story of the wise men was pretty amazing. The shepherds, again, they're representing the earth energy. They're representing the spiritual connection to earth, the divine connection to earth and all things on the earth. Shepherds, again, represented kind of the common folk. My belief, or what came to me while I was doing all of this, was they, shepherd throughout the Bible were common people, and some of those raised to great heights of power or heroism. And I think that was just kind of a symbol of what this little baby Jesus was going to do. Now, the important thing to remember in all of this, we often say Jesus Christ. The real truth of this is Jesus the Christ. The importance, the reason I mention that now, Jesus Christ makes it sound like that's one person. Jesus is his first name, Christ his last name, and only he can do the things that he did. That is not true. Jesus the Christ, it was Jesus of Nazareth who had and lived and showed the perfect example of what the Christ mind is all about. And Jesus said, follow me, do the things that I have done, and you will be able to do that and more. Jesus did not say, follow me and I'll do it for you. We've kind of come to believe that. And folks, that puts us in a victim mentality. Jesus said, follow me. And all the things that I've done, you can do and more. That puts us in taking responsibility for our own life, taking responsibility for our own spirituality, keeping the connection with God fully present. We have that power. We have that ability. And that's the Christmas story from a metaphysical standpoint. It's very symbolic, and like I said, I can start studying today and have this same talk next year, and there's going to be so much more. It just keeps going on and on and on. Thank you.